Hello and welcome back. I'm Dr. Mack as we continue our mini-series on the consequences that follow an action and their effect upon the future displays of those actions. In this segment, we look at the withholding of reinforcement, what we sometimes refer to as ignoring. We talked in the previous segment about positive reinforcement. You show an action, something you desire comes to you, that increases the likelihood of that action being shown under the same or similar circumstances in the future. We also took a look at negative reinforcement. Let's take a quick refresher quiz on negative reinforcement. It's said that plea bargaining involves negative reinforcement. How so? Pleading guilty to a lesser charge to avoid perhaps being found guilty of a greater charge. The act of pleading guilty to a lesser charge keeps the possibility of that really awful thing, the greater penalty, from being imposed. It's said that negative reinforcement is involved in weight loss. How so? Yes, that when somebody engages in healthier eating and more exercise, it makes the awful thing, the extra pounds, go away. The act of healthy eating and exercising is negatively reinforced. It is reinforcing to have the negative thing, the extra pounds, go away. And there's probably some positive reinforcement here. Yes, that those same acts that were negatively reinforced, eating healthy and exercising, also bring something desirable to that individual, a leaner profile. Some folks keep the cats off the aquarium by giving them a shoot of cold water whenever they hop up on the edge. How's negative reinforcement involved here? We talked about hopping up on the edge, but that behavior gets punished with the cold shoot of water. What behavior would be negatively reinforced? What action would that cat show to keep the punishment, cold stream of water, away? Staying off of the aquarium. That action is negatively reinforced. Staying off the aquarium keeps the awful thing, the cold shoot of water, away. You're holding your baby and your arms get tired, so you pass your youngster off to another individual to hold it. So let's see what action was negatively reinforced there. Right, your arms were hurting, there was pain. The act of passing your child to someone else makes the pain go away as your arms recover. But then your baby starts crying. So who is this unfamiliar individual? And you reach out and take your baby back. How's that negatively reinforced? Oh, yes. Now the act of holding your child takes that undesirable thing, that punishment, the crying of your child, away. And you can avoid this from happening in the future. So, let's take it a step further. What are some things that kids do at home or at school to receive something they desire? What actions do they show to get something desirable to come to them? Or conversely, what are some things that kids do to escape or avoid in the first place something they find punishing? Let's go first of all with the positive reinforcement, showing an act to receive an object, privilege, or social contact. You probably came up with a few things there. They behave well to get the points or the stickers. Maybe they earn time with the teacher. Perhaps the parent says, you have earned a play date now that you have done this. Now, kids avoiding tasks or duties, responsibilities, and obligations, or avoiding certain environments that feel uncomfortable due to the people or the setting. Oh yeah, kids sneaking away when they should be cleaning up that mess they made. Maybe putting their head down, complaining, finding something else to do to avoid that difficult academic work. Engaging in some action to avoid public embarrassment. Here's another principle that we're going to cover. We talked about how reinforcement strengthens a behavior. Well, what if we have a behavior that we don't like to see in that youngster? That behavior, why do you keep doing that? Well, the consequence has to be reinforcement. Why do people keep showing behaviors? Because there's a payoff for doing so. So if we have a behavior that we dislike and we want to get rid of it, extinguish it, we can do so by making sure that when that aberrant, undesirable, errant behavior is shown, that no benefit reaches that child. And we make sure that even if some benefit does reach that youngster, that the penalty outweighs the reward. But there are problems with giving punishment, penalties. We're going to get to those in the next segment of this mini-series on consequences that follow actions. So, if we want to extinguish, get rid of undesirable behaviors, we keep the benefit from reaching the youngster, or we make sure that the punishment is stronger than the reinforcement. Oh, I'm ignoring you. Okay. Well, if we say that, we really aren't. We're paying attention to that behavior. So ignoring to extinction. Gee, is that how the dodo birds became extinct? Okay. What do behaviors mean when they say ignoring is going on or implement ignoring? What are these folks doing when they ignore? Well, they're making sure that no reinforcement of any kind from any source reaches that individual who's just shown that errant behavior. We keep that action from getting its usual payoff. We reduce it as much as we can, hopefully to zero. But what are the sources of reinforcement? For example, for a youngster who calls out the answer rather than raising the hand in class and waiting to be acknowledged before giving the answer. Think about that. Where does this kid get reinforcement when he or she keeps yelling out those answers? Oh, how about us? When we remind the youngster not to call out, and especially when we take the answer anyway and move on. How about the other kids when they complain? But you say, but how can complaining be reinforcement to the youngster who called out the answer? Oh, that youngster who called out the answer influenced his or her world. They made a difference. They impacted their environment. That is reinforcing. They have shown greater speed or intellectual ability by calling out the answer before the others, at least in his or her mindset. And it may actually bring some inner pleasure. I have been rewarded by people realizing I have given the correct answer. So, don't be an ignore. No, not you. Okay. What do we want to do when we ignore a behavior? Well, there are certain procedures for doing it correctly, and it is difficult to ignore. What's hard about ignoring? Pause the podcast and think about that. Why might it be difficult to ignore a behavior? Welcome back. Okay. Well, the other students are saying, hey, how come you're letting him get away with it and you're not doing anything about it? Or the other kids say, oh, I guess the teacher's cool with this, we can do it too. Now you're going to get more of that behavior. Some behaviors are self-rewarding. The kids are thinking, teacher, please ignore this. I enjoy doing it without your interruption. So we have to be sure that we are the source of reinforcement if our ignoring is going to be anything other than inconsequential. And we frequently witness what's known as a behavior burst that could even lead to aggression. As we try to make this behavior become extinct, doing so can actually create aggression. How so? Well, the student not being able to figure out, why aren't I getting the usual payoff from the teacher here? Says, oh, maybe the teacher's a little tired today or something, and escalates the behavior of an octave. And the teacher ignores it. She stays the course. He stays the course. But the intensity increases as the youngster tries to get that usual reward. We get into yelling, cursing, hitting. Can we ignore those things? Of course not. And so we respond to them. And guess what? We've just reinforced a new and worse behavior. Now the kid says, well, why would I do that old, low-level behavior? Yes, can we ignore these things? You ignore a kid yelling out an answer. So the kid yells it louder, and you ignore it. And finally, the behavior escalates into, hey, dummy, the answer is 4 bonds in the carbon atom. And you think, dummy? And we respond. We just created that new and worse behavior. A student unable to get noticed via the usual ways and means displays escalating versions of the behavior in an attempt to get that desired action. Maybe a student who usually gets your attention by verbally pestering another student now insults that student. If we ignore that stronger version, she or he may then poke the other student. If we and the other student manage to ignore that behavior, she may throw a punch to the arm of that other student. Can we ignore that behavior? Probably not. And we give our attention to a new, worse behavior, and we reinforce that one. So, how do we ignore effectively? Well, we know that ignoring will work if certain conditions are in effect. The student has to want our attention if our ignoring is going to work. We have to be able to withhold attention during the behavior burst. But what if we can't? Then we shouldn't get into ignoring in the first place. We have to be sure that attention from all other sources is blocked, including the kids. We try to get the kids to ignore it. But here's a situation where the kids are doing a great job of ignoring that behavior because they're going to get points for doing so. There's a payoff for them to ignore that youngster's behavior. But the youngster begins to escalate the behavior. A colleague of yours, thinking maybe you don't have good classroom management skills, then leans in the door, points at the kid and says, "Yo, knucklehead, knock it off!" Wow, some reinforcement came from another source. And it's an unpredictable type of reinforcement, the type that really strengthens behaviors, just like gambling does. Gamblers win very rarely, but it's that unpredictable nature of getting the reinforcement that keeps them in the act of gambling. So what do we do? What can we do if we're ignoring a behavior and it starts to escalate and the other kids are complaining? Try something akin to this script. Class, I want you to know that I'm concerned about the behavior that we just all witnessed. And be reassured, I will be addressing it later. I am not letting this pass. The rules still apply to everyone. I'll be dealing with that student's behavior later during, and you mentioned some time that youngster enjoys. We're not looking at the youngster, we're not talking to the youngster, we're talking to the others. Now, my dedicated scholars, let's return to our activity. But then the kids ask, well, what are you going to do to him? What are you going to do to her? What's our response? How about, well, I'm not sure if we can still do that after what happened to that kid last year. I'm going to have to check with the principal on this one. Or when they ask, what are you going to do to him or her? You just smirk and chuckle. Kids not knowing what's going to happen to them, they imagine the worst. Hopefully that subdues the behavior. They show the appropriate behavior to avoid the awful thing. What kind of reinforcement? Right, negative reinforcement. All right, we finished our segment on ignoring of a behavior, withholding positive reinforcement, keeping positive or negative reinforcement, any kind of reinforcement, from reaching that youngster when he or she shows the undesirable behavior. We did just touch on some of the problems with punishment. We'll go more in depth into positive and negative punishment in the next segment of our little mini-series on consequences. I'm Tom McIntyre from BehaviorAdvisor.com, signing off.